Welcome to Analogue Space Mission course, part number 9. Today we'll be talking about finance, media and logistics involved in the preparation of analog space missions. Finance, media, logistics, although they sound cumbersome and not really interesting, are actually absolutely vital for the mission. Without logistics, you do not have a mission, and without finances, you cannot create your mission, or a very, very limited mission. And those finances are actually often dependent on the media outreach. You also have logistics that depend massively on the finances or actually the budget that is available for the space mission. All those three chapters are kind of involved one together, and on the right side you can, for example, see Media Day doing one of the Austrian Space Forum missions. I think this one was Amadi 20, if I'm correct, and you can see on the screen an astronaut that's actually talking to the crew. There's lots of events where you have to talk to media. It's one way to get funding. So we're going to get into more details about how we actually need logistics, what the kind of logistics we need, finances and media. Finances, why and how do we need it? If you want a habitat that is quite realistic and has, for example, is pressurized or has life support systems in it or is very remote, you're going to need a lot of money. Why money if remote? Because you're going to need to get there. So the logistics involved are going to lead to some costs, okay? So you need to get some money. You can get money in different ways, but you really need more money if you want to have usually higher fidelity. Doesn't mean that the space missions are the most expensive, necessarily the best. Obviously it's not always correlated. That depends also in the will to make the space mission more realistic, to the astronaut willing to comply to some guidelines, but usually there's obviously a correlation because it allows you to do more advanced systems, better spacesuits, better habitats, to be in more remote regions, to have better just a mission control center, for example. So obviously, the more money, the better. And you can actually do something quite nice when you have a bit of money. So for example, if you do find a sponsor, you can reduce the cost of participation for astronauts, okay? For example, the Askabos mission was all sponsor-based and crowdfunding based, and that allowed for the astronauts not to have to pay anything. And that meant that students from all around the world could participate and can still participate. Whereas some other missions where it might cost between $1,000 and $6,000 US, it's not affordable to everyone, and usually you also have to travel there. So the costs that are involved with it can be quite difficult and make it not always accessible to all. Therefore, sponsors are a good way to reduce costs for the astronauts and open the analog missions to a broader range of people. So how do we finance an analog space mission? Well, one of the first steps is actually to find advisors. Advisors have two advantages. The advisors tell you what you might be doing wrong, where to improve your analog mission. So for example, they might tell you, well, in the logistics side of things, you're missing this, or this is not realistic enough, or where you're going to find that kind of money, etc., etc. So they are very good because they help you, guide you, and it can be, for example, astronauts or aerospace engineers or psychologists or explorers. There's a wide variety of people who actually can be of help to you. And usually you're going to pick up some people who've got quite a bit of experience and therefore are quite famous in their fields. So you can use that. When you have people who are backing you, who are of that level, usually it makes a very good impression on sponsors and on the general public. So when you apply for sponsorship, for example, you would like to have the food of the astronaut sponsored. For example, you'd like the food to be freeze-dried and you need a specific brand. You can come to this company with a sponsorship folder where you explain the goal of the mission, how you're going to get it done, where the product would be used, for example, how you're going to talk about that product into the mission. So what's the benefit for that sponsor? And you can say, by the way, we have this person on our board of advisors. And that really shows that you are doing something serious, that you're being backed by people who actually know what they're doing, okay? The other thing you can do is to apply for grants, especially if you're student-led mission. This is one way to get money. For example, universities tend to kind of enjoy those kind of projects. So do have a look into that. You can also use crowdfunding if you see that you're missing, I don't know, $100, $1,000 or things like this. For example, food for the MCC or some just little material you might need, or just postcard for who knows what, okay? If you're missing a little bit of money, you can easily crowdfund that money simply by having the families of the astronauts or anyone that was involved. The parents usually will be quite happy to do that, or the family or friends, because it's such fantastic projects, okay? So crowdfunding is also an option. However, do not base your whole mission on crowdfunding. Analogue space mission can range between a few thousand to like 250,000, even a million, okay, per mission, right? So it's a lot of money involved. You cannot just get that money like this by crowdfunding. Well, you could if you're very, very patient and you have somehow very good arguments, but statistically you should better get sponsors. And financing actually from sponsoring is actually quite interesting, because you can get more than just money. You can get cameras, you can get phones, you can maybe get computers, you can get food, any kind of thing that means you don't need to pay for later is still part of finances, okay? So you need to be doing some research and sponsorship. And then lastly, there's obviously the contribution from the astronauts. As mentioned, it's between like about 1,000 to 6,000. It depends really on the mission. But this contribution can help you do missions after mission, or cover at least the cost of the food of the astronauts, part of the training, part of their clothes, or any kind of material you're lending them, and all the electricity that you're using. Okay, so this is one way that you can make sure that you've got a stable income of money coming your way. Now, the media. So for missions from NASA, ESA, and other agencies, the money comes just from the taxes of people, right? So they can decide how they want to invest that money. Well, decide. They have a clear protocol, but they have a steady income of money. Whereas for civilian, as I call them, analog space mission, that money, as mentioned, is very up and down, okay? One way to make sure that you have sponsors is to use the media. If your sponsor sees that you've got no media representation, there's nothing in there for them, you know. Maybe 6 astronauts are going to like their product, and that's not even guaranteed, and they might not talk about it, and they might not do enough advertisement. Whereas if you have a whole project that has, say, 500 followers, 1,000 followers, and in this project you show people using the product, then already there's way more in there for them, okay? So you have to use this media because you might have sponsors, also because your family might want to understand what you're doing. It's profitable to have such analog space mission in the wider public. Why? Because we're actually teaching something, we are learning something, we're improving life on Earth and in space. So it's a wonderful project to share. So there's a whole lot of advantages into having this in the media. Also, you usually take time on your holidays or just away from work to do those missions. So it's a good way to say, well, this is what I've been doing, and I haven't been on the beach for 2 weeks. I've actually been doing some quite interesting work and bringing science further. So there's a lot of good things into doing it, like doing media training. But the thing that you absolutely need to do is make sure that your crew and anyone in the agency or mission that might talk to journalists is actually trained in public speaking. Why? If you have somebody who is not necessarily comfortable, but really bad at public speaking, it might actually ruin the experience. Media might not be so interested because the information was not clear, or that person was just extremely annoying or was rude. Whatever it is, it can actually damage the reputation of the mission, which is something you do not want, especially if you're running low on funds, okay? You can train people though. One of my astronauts, for example, absolutely hated public speaking and media training, and by the end of the mission he was actually quite comfortable doing it, okay? So it's not that complicated, but it's good if you have, for example, a professional training, at least a few people from Mission Control Center. For example, the flight director usually will be interviewed, maybe the biomedical engineer. Usually the public is quite interested in what the medics have to say about it. So these those two, plus the astronaut inside the base, because these are going to be the main focus. They tend to be the whole image of the mission. Although there's 50, 100, 200, 500 people preparing a mission, in the end what the public really sees is the astronauts. So these are the figure of the mission. Okay, so they need to be good at public speaking. They need to know how to do it. They need to have, for example, a certain slogan or any kind of information about the mission that is confirmed to the mission goal. If you start saying, oh, the mission goal is this, and everybody else says, oh no, it's that, then you have already a conflict. The media is going to be very disturbed. To be honest, the media often doesn't understand what analog space missions are. You really, really need to be clear. And if you have already protocols that are existing that you can use, it makes your life way, way easier. You can also use universities to talk about your missions. Universities tend to find those projects quite interesting, quite uplifting to see students partaking in such experiences. So you can use universities, for example, to communicate with the media. And you can really also use any sort of contacts that you might have in it. Obviously, if you have your mom, your dad, or your friend that's working in national TV, etc., very, very useful. Usually your crew will be international. They might have already the links to the national TVs to make sure that that happened too. If you can say that your mission was broadcasted all over the world, that is raising a lot of interest, and it's very good for your astronauts. It's also very good for further recruitments if the mission is going to be something that is obviously repeated, for example. So it's quite an interesting part of the mission, and it can be actually quite scary. For my mission, just before we started, we were in front of the base and we were waiting for a bus of journalists to come in. And the bus, it was just riding through, it's about 1 kilometer, 0.5 tunnel, and the bus came in and we could hear them arriving, and they stopped the bus, opened the doors, jumped out. About 15 journalists just got in front of us, and they didn't say hi, didn't say how you doing, or today we're going to be doing this, nada. They just looked at us, took out the cameras, took out the microphone, started rolling. And that was a little bit stressful, I must say. But in the end, you learn how to deal with them. You ask them, okay, what do you want to see? What do you want me to talk about? And sometimes they will say, oh, we need you to walk up and down the stairs, or we need you to look at this. Are we going to ask you a question on that? It's actually quite straightforward. You just need to have maybe a few sessions, or you can also train on other people, and that makes that actually quite nice and easy and friendly. And you can also diversify the media. So, for example, once you made this protocol of communication for all your members, you can diversify it and say, well, this is a protocol for blogs, this is a protocol for podcasts, this is a protocol for photos. For example, don't take photos of this. This is a no-go zone. And speaking of no-go zones, this is something that you have also to know. Because you're trying to do analog space missions, you don't necessarily want any visitors. So do not say, oh, the base is going to be exactly there. By the way, you can see through the window at this point. Okay, you might have people walking their dogs in front of your window, and that's going to break the simulation for the analog astronauts. Okay, so this is something that this should not be communicated to the media, or if it's quite remote and you know nobody's going to show up, then you can say where it is. But otherwise, this is something that needs to be kept confidential. Okay. And then you can also use different media. I think, for example, having podcasts in the base are very, very interesting, because you get kind of a raw feeling of the day, of how the astronauts are feeling. And, you know, sometimes you haven't taken a shower in a week, so having a podcast is actually quite nice. And people like different things. People like Twitter, people like images, people like sounds, people like videos. So having a diversity of media means that you're going to reach out to more people. And you can also do different things. I was very lucky, for example, to do a TED talk on analog space missions. And that was great, because suddenly you can reach over 300 people in one go. Like 300 people who've never learned about analog space missions suddenly learn about it. Okay, so this is a way to really make quickly an impact, and people are suddenly, wow, what is this? What's this thing? Even if your talk is not good, the fact that you talk about something new but space related usually makes it very, very interesting. Okay. And you can ask for then communication to be spread out by obviously other friends of the medium. Usually, as we mentioned, the universities are keen on this distribution of knowledge. Workplaces, not necessarily always. Some people will be very understanding that you might be doing projects on the side. Other workplaces a bit less, so you might not be using the company's, you know, social media platform to show awareness about it. But for any kind of research, usually that is a very, very much a plus. Now about the logistics. My face, again, always in the wrong place. Sorry about that. So, as mentioned before, no logistics, no mission, okay? What do the logistics encompasses? This is not an exhaustive list. You can obviously add always more, and it really depends on how you're going to define your work package. But in general, the logistics has to find a habitat and control the safety about the habitat, has to organize the transport, has to think about all the equipment beforehand, for stuff, for example, for the base, and then for the experiment, and for the MCC, also find an MCC. They have to do then the inventory in the base. So once you have all of this, you go in the base and you do the inventory and you check that everything is there. You have to check what kind of equipment the astronauts take. And then you do the post-mission inventory, return of the experiment equipment, and return of any kind of equipment back to base. Okay, let's go into more details about this. So, habitat, transport, and safety. So, you find and define the habitat. Okay, then you need to check the equipment that is needed to make the habitat a bit more habitable. Okay, for example, is the habitat completely bare? Is it a bare tunnel? Is it a lava tube? Are you going to put something in it? Are you going to install shelves? Are you going to install a table? Is it safe? Is there a fire system? Is there an escape system? For my Analogue mission, for example, we were just under 2 or 3 dams even. So we had to see which escape tunnels we needed to use in case there was a flood. Like in case one of the dams broke or there was a problem, then we needed to exit through another tunnel. Okay, this is the kind of thing that logistic is responsible for. If you are renting a habitat or a base from somebody else, these people will know about the safety regulations, so it makes it easier, okay? But you also have to check for yourself what kind of fire and emergency exits they might have and what kind of protocols need to be established or that you might need to create. Especially if you add some material in it, such as beds and shelves, you need to make sure that they are fireproof. Then you also have to define all the emergency contacts, then the safety protocols, so also teach all the astronauts, teach everyone that might be working at any point inside the base how to escape. I'm not going to talk too much about the habitat since we have a whole chapter about it, but obviously there was this whole thing about, you know, where to pick it and how to pick it. That obviously it's mission goal related, but then you have to do all the logistics that go behind it. And then once you have this habitat, for example, if it's super far away, you're going to need transport to it. So you might need a plane or you might need a truck. Are you bringing the habitat somewhere, for example? What kind of, I don't know, huge truck are you going to need to move it around? How are you going to get the logistics there? How are you going to do also what we call the takeoff and landing? So on the day of the start of the mission and the end of the mission, what transport are you using to go and pick up the astronauts? Okay, what is a rocket basically? And this is something that logistics has to organize. And then you also have to find an MCC. Usually the habitat will be in a certain location and then you try to put the MCC not necessarily too far off, or you will have a ground operations support team as mentioned in previous chapters. But you might want to have your MCC not too far. So check, okay, what is the cost of this MCC? Where can we put it? Is there like stable connection? And can I fit everyone and can I get to sleep? Okay, if you have all your astronauts ready but your MCC is not ready, then you have a problem. So again, the job of the logistics team. Now the equipment that is needed for the astronaut, that can be tedious or very, very satisfying. It really depends. But you have different kinds of equipment. You have everything that got to do with hygiene, so toilet paper, wipes, shampoo, toothpaste, that kind of thing. You have to also check that material before. I think it's very, very important that you make sure that you tried it and you like it. And you need to do a permission inventory. So you make a list of everything that you need, you buy it, you make sure that you have enough quantities and some backup for some of this. Obviously toilet paper you might want to have a little bit more, because if you don't have toilet paper anymore, that might actually lead to small crisis depending. But it's actually important. It's simple and it's obvious, but it's important to have some backups for a few things. Mattresses, you don't need a backup. Normally if it's a bit damaged, it still works. For other tools, you might need a backup. So you have to make an inventory. So sleeping quarters, hygiene, kitchen, food, everything can be planned by a nutritionist, but you might have needs for some stuff like cutlery, plates, dishwasher soap, etc., etc. Other things that you might need are tables, chairs, generators, batteries, spacesuits, and everything that goes with the spacesuits. That's the job of the logistics team. Then you need to adapt the equipment. You have to think, okay, well, what's the actual temperature inside the base? You know, did you pick up the right batteries? Did you pick up the right equipment? Is it going to withstand the temperature or humidity or any particular conditions that might go with the base? And then you have also to think about all the communication equipment, and that's both for the base and the MCC. The communication equipment is absolutely vital. If you don't have it, you don't have a mission, okay? Or you have just some astronauts doing some random thing inside the base, and then the flight plan is probably going to crash after half a day, and you're not going to be able to finish all the experiments, okay? You need this communication between Mission Control Center and the base. So one of the first things you do, make sure that you have enough computers, that you have enough Ethernet cables or Wi-Fi, USBs, or whatever it is that you need to make it work. But you check that you have all of these for MCC, that you have all of these for the base, that you have backups, that you have microphones, that you have extra cables, etc., etc., to make sure that the communication is fine. And then there's the equipment for experiments. So for the experiments, it's quite particular because you first need the experiments team to look at for which experiments do they have. So they've selected all the experiments, and then they can say, okay, well, we have this experiment that is actually the same as another one. Well, at least for the beginning, we're going to need the same material. We might use, I don't know, a magnetic stirrer or a hot stove, or I don't know, what could it be, a magnet. Any kind of devices that don't necessarily need to be used once. It can be used for different experiments. So instead of packing everything twice, you can see where does it overlap and can be used twice. Sometimes the experiments need to be so precise that you do want different test tubes, you do want different bechers or whatever, containers or whatever it is, okay? And you also want to pack a little bit extra. So magnetic stirrer, this one you take once because it's heavy, it's expensive. However, beaks and any kind of glassware, you might want to have some extra in case an astronaut breaks one, in case they break during transport, and you really need to make an inventory. And once you actually have this equipment and you transported them in the base and the astronaut used them, you need to do again inventory at the end of the mission to make sure that you have everything, and you need to bring it back to whoever lent it to you. You might buy this equipment, but scientific equipment tends to be extremely expensive or really increases the budget needed for an space mission. So if you can actually borrow this from universities and they tell you exactly what they need and how, they can even pack it for you, so if they're motivated, and then you ship all of this to the Analogue space mission, and then you do your experiments and then back home. That can make it much easier, as long as you make sure that you've really labeled everything, that you don't confuse which one is which, to which university it goes, makes it much easier. But it's something that has to be done in close ties with the experiments team. They will know what experiments they are, where you can really replace one item with another, where you can use the same, and how many of extra measurements or extra material you might need. Then there's the very simple but astronaut equipment. Okay, when astronauts are on missions, especially very long missions, they're going to need personal item. And as much as they might want to take, I don't know, the magic pen or whatever it is, they probably will take bigger items like guitars and books, or I don't know, maybe a volleyball or a basketball, whatever they can use in the habitat. This is something that the logistics teams has to approve and has to check for. Why? Because if you've got 6 astronauts who take guitars, there's not going to be a lot of space in the habitat, okay? Or there might actually be a lot of noise. Or if they say, I want to take my phone to call all my family, that actually breaks the isolation. Or maybe they take a Monopoly and then everybody will try killing each other. So you can take a board game, for example, but yeah, maybe veto a bit what's been taken in, check how much size it actually takes, how much space is available, and then you can approve it or not. But you have to also account for it. And then finally, you go and find the money that you need for your base. And there's some creative ways of finding money. Sometimes you can go to university and say, this is the kind of project, and then it becomes incorporated to a bigger faculty of the university. But usually it's just, you're just going to have to go the hard way. You're going to go and check with the habitats, start working on logistics, find those advisors, Start working on your media communication by creating your website, your Instagram, your Twitter, whatever it is, and start bombarding journalists until they get enough interest that other sponsors are like, okay, yes, it's worth giving you my product or giving you some money to get you guys up there. Okay, so good luck and may the money flow with you.